real quick too.
Oh, I just
Uh,
did it.
Thank you, Holly.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, so many problems. Kick it off, Erica.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Um, I'm Erica. You can go to the next slide. Um, or I guess we can leave it on the opening page while people are still rolling in. I don't know. Um, my name is Erica. Thank you so much for being here. I am based in Tampa, Florida. Happy Earth Month, everyone, also. Um, For the past few years, I have been working as an independent researcher focused on waste reduction strategies and more recently on the circular economy. My climate journey has been rooted in waste reduction. I started with food waste and compost and sustainable agriculture, and then moved to transitioned into sustainable fashion. I started a bow tie business, which led me to composting my fabric scraps because I had a lot of fabric scraps in my little home studio and was looking for a way to reduce my own clothing and textile waste. And that led me to doing more experiments on textile composting, which led us here today. And more recently, I am serving as the director of Rosebud Continuum, which is a sustainability education and research center in Land O'Lakes, Florida. And I think most people on this call oh, um, are in Remake, um, but a little bit about Remake. It is an advocacy organization fighting uh, for human rights and climate justice in the clothing and textile industry. They have worked on several campaigns to enact policies that hold big fashion accountable. The Fabric Act is one of them. They have other campaigns to help educate folks on the hidden environmental and human cost of fast fashion. The No New Clothes Challenge is one of the campaigns that they have done, and they unite a global community of change makers. I have been a Remake ambassador for 1 year now. I joined the team last year in April, so it's 1 year for me. And then we will get into the presentation. So where we are coming from, we have to lay the foundation to know where we are, why textile composting is, in my opinion, a very underutilized solution. And the next slide. As a global community, we are in the midst of a clothing abundance crisis. Approximately 100 billion garments are produced each year, while there are only 8.5 billion people on the planet. This is probably the only industry where supply far exceeds demand. The US and the EU are the largest consumers of clothing and therefore the largest producers of clothing and textile waste. A lot of clothes are being shipped to Africa and South America. Many more clothes are still being landfilled, but the volume that is being recycled via donation streams primarily are being sent to other countries, perpetuating a practice called waste colonialism. The Orr Foundation has done a lot of research and has a lot of education about waste colonialism. And it essentially, when we participate in these donation streams, we make our problem someone else's problem, is the short of it. The circular economy has emerged as a paradigm shift to address this waste because we're not going to donate our way out of the clothing abundance crisis. We're not going to upcycle our way out of the clothing abundance crisis. We have to have other means, other avenues in place to address this waste. the bioeconomy, which is part of composting, and we're going to get into that a little bit more in a later slide, but the bioeconomy is largely left out of circular economy, clothing, and textile talks. And I think really at the crux of all this, why we have this crisis of excess clothing is there's a lack of infrastructure globally in every country, in every community. There's just a lack of infrastructure to handle the sheer volume of waste of clothes that are being produced and consumed each year. And the next slide, please. Because of this massive volume of clothes that we're wasting, it's taking a huge toll on the environment. This slide and the next slide are kind of in tandem. If you wanted to go to the next slide, it's a little bit more interesting. Clothing production has increased 400% since the year 2000, which is truly wild if you think about it. Clothing is super resource intensive to grow cotton to make clothes, to extract oil to make polyester. Clothing is extremely resource intensive. Cotton is a very thirsty crop. Clothes are traveling millions of miles before they end up in our closet. And then they're traveling millions of miles again, ending up in our landfills and in landfills in other countries. The textile and clothing industry is extremely linear with a buy, use, discard model. And with everything that's being discarded, it's wasting all of the resources that it went into making those clothes. We're wasting all of the water that went into growing the cotton or the linen. We're wasting all of the energy that went into spinning the fibers to make polyester and nylon threads and elastic, not to mention all the human capital that is involved in making clothes because all clothes are made by hand. And it's extremely insulting to all of the garment workers to just throw those clothes away, as well as a tremendous waste of water and energy and other resources to throw those clothes away. So moving on to the next slide, that's a little bit to lay the foundation about where we are, why this is a problem, and then or how we got there, and moving to here. The circular economy has emerged as a way to address this waste. We had to do something, right? Because the volume of clothes is simply too great and we can't ignore it anymore. But how do we integrate clothing and textiles into the circular economy when not all clothes are worth saving? Trends come and go. Some items are too worn, too damaged, have lost their integrity, be it the elastic, for example. Some clothes are simply not worth saving, like your company picnic t-shirt from 2 years ago that's dated, and even if you donate it, nobody wants your old company logo t-shirt. That's not worth really shipping overseas or elsewhere. It's not going to be sold anywhere. Some clothes reach their true end of life. They are damaged beyond repair, stained beyond repair, etc. We can't upcycle everything, as already stated. And there are avenues, which we will get to in just a second, about how clothes are being incorporated into the circular economy, but there's also an opportunity for clothes for the circular economy and the bioeconomy to come together. And the bio just means earth. So for compost, this is where there's an opportunity for clothes to be incorporated in the bioeconomy and the circular economy. And we'll go to the next slide. Here are some case studies of circularity in action for all of those clothes that have, well, not all of them, but for some of those clothes that have reached their true end of life, there are several companies. The four listed here, these are just different case studies. There are more companies within these niche sectors doing these kind of recycling streams. These are just some case studies, but there are several companies out there who are taking textile waste, shredding it, pulping it, making it into building insulation, as well as using it in sound and recording studios, acoustic studios. There are some companies who are pulping the fabric and adding a medium like a glue, making it into molds and making furniture bricks, like little modular furniture pieces, end tables, wall tiles for wall decor. Companies doing textile to textile recycling, which is either mechanical recycling, separation of fibers, or chemical recycling. Because of that, it's not as widespread an application. And then there are some companies who are taking the textile waste, pulping it, and using it into carpet tiles. These are all wonderful companies. There are more players within these little niche spaces. And these are some of the ways that we're recycling textiles, which is wonderful to see. And all of these are, even though some of them have been around for like 10, 20 years, it's still a very small, very niche, very new industry. And then we can go to the next slide. So enter textile composting as another tool in the circularity toolbox. This paragraph here is taken straight from a research proposal I've been working on, and I just wanted to highlight some of the main points for you. Composting in general, in my opinion, is one of the most underutilized tools in the circularity toolbox. As a climate solution, it's one of the lowest hanging fruits. Textile composting is an underutilized yet excellent and promising tool for incorporating natural fiber clothing waste into the circular economy. Composting is easy to set up. It is a practice that crosses borders easily, so it can be implemented in any region, in any community, in any country. Composting, especially composting textiles, addresses waste. It creates a meaningful end product, and it works with nature rather than against it. So it is a very holistic practice, in my opinion, that has a lot of positive touch points. And it is an underutilized tool in the circularity toolbox. And then we can go to the next slide. Compost is amazing. It is one of my most favorite things. My favorite thing about compost is that even while something is actively decaying, it still yields new growth, which I also think is a great metaphor for life. Compost is wonderful because it is a multivitamin for the earth. Most soil blends that you would buy at Home Depot or Lowe's or Target or any of these box stores have a 3-nutrient blend, an NPK blend, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. If we as people subsisted on a diet of 3 nutrients, we would be so sick. We would be ill all the time. The earth, plants are the same way. Plants are like people. Compost provides this multivitamin for the earth with vitamins A, B, C, zinc, calcium, iron to the plants. When they have this healthier base to grow in, they are stronger, they are more resilient, they are more pest resistant as well, and resistant to other stressors in the environment, such as drought or even floods sometimes. Compost holds a lot of moisture, which can be a real tool in places that are more arid or have more prone to drought. Um, Without compost, without healthy soil, we would have no life. Compost is magic, and it is really a multivitamin, not only for the earth, but for all the plants in which that are grown in that compost. And we can go to the next slide. This is a case study out of Australia that I've been following for the past few years. This is a really cool public-private government example. Sam Colton, he's the farmer. This cotton field is his farm. With support from the Queensland government and in partnership with Cotton Australia, they are taking denim, shredding the denim, incorporating it into the topsoil on this cotton farm, growing cotton, new cotton crops out of that soil, out of that farmland, and then spinning that cotton into new denim pants. And it's a very closed loop practice. It's a very cool system. There's a soil scientist, Dr. Oliver Knox, who has been advising on this project for the past few years. I've listened to interviews with him and have been keeping up to date with this project, and they've composted 2 tons of cotton so far, which is really impressive. And their closed loop system is definitely an excellent model that can be adopted in other areas. And then moving on to the next slide. I've also been composting textiles, not at the same scale as Cotton Australia, obviously, because I'm just me. But to date, in my own compost research, I have composted over 1,000 pounds of clothing and textile waste. When I compost my clothing, I'm also composting food. If with compost, there's the green matter and brown matter, or the carbon input and the nitrogen input. The food waste, there's no nutritional value in clothing. The food waste is what really feeds the soil and adds all those good nutrients and vitamins and minerals that we talked about in the previous slide. But it's a very symbiotic relationship. The food waste does help break down the carbon, the clothing. And so I've composted 1,000 pounds of clothes, 5,000 pounds of food, and created over 500 pounds of soil. With this research, this field in general, there is more research that needs to be done. A question I get very often is, is there any leaching from the dyes of the clothes into the soil? And I don't know the answer to that. This is one of the areas that needs to be investigated further. I am partnering with a student at University of Florida, a PhD student. She is testing PFAS levels in different compost samples from different feedstocks, like to-go containers, for example, that say compostable or biodegradable but have a wax lining. So she has different feedstocks, compost made with different feedstocks, and my textile composting is one of the feedstocks in the soil samples that she's testing for PFAS levels. It's still being tested. I don't have the results yet. She doesn't have the results yet. I will keep anyone posted on that. But there are some people working on this. There is research being done with this, but I also just want to be clear and transparent that we don't have all the answers for the effects of textile composting yet. So we can go to the next slide. And then looking ahead, so we laid the foundation of how we got here. what the landscape of textile circularity looks like now, and then looking ahead. Next slide. We have proof of concept. Textiles can be composted. I know from my own personal research, we have the Cotton Australia example of what it looks like at scale, but what does this look like scaled up even further to incorporate into cities across the world? This is the real question. Merrill Brothers, this is an excellent private-public government partnership example. I think this is the kind of partnership that will have to happen in order to really move, in order to achieve a true textile circular system. Merrill Brothers is a private facility. They are a biosolids facility. They have a partnership with Pasco County government. That's the government connection. The wastewater treatment facility, the biosolids at the bottom of the tank after the water is being treated. Merrill Brothers takes the biosolids from the bottom of the wastewater treatment facility, takes them to their facility, dries them out in a giant greenhouse, which is the middle photo on this slide. And it gets aerated with a tractor. Once the biosolids reach a certain level of dehydration, they go into this machine, to this extruder machine, and they get made into little pellets. And then they are dried, dehydrated even further in another conveyor belt machine. The end product are these little fertilizer pellets that are slow release, and they are sold to farmers. This is the public-private government connection. They're sold to the public, to farmers, bagged and sold as fertilizer in garden stores and nurseries for the public to buy. It's a really cool facility. They're one of the first of their kind that is taking human waste and turning it into a commercial grade fertilizer. And it's a really cool example of having the government support, the government connection, and the private-public relation. And so moving on to the next slide. Regarding textile circularity, these are some of the stakeholders involved, and similar to all other recycling streams, the onus is on the end user to recycle appropriately. It's you and I's responsibility to put this glass bottle in the appropriate bin. It's your responsibility as the end user to put your plastic bottle, your aluminum can in the right bin. It's our responsibility as the end user to donate our clothes to a thrift store or other charity or wherever we take them, which is great. That's fine that it's our responsibility. But if the infrastructure is not there, you and I can have the best of intentions. Even retail outlets who are the middlemen in this, like Patagonia and Eileen Fisher, are sort of the gold star for sustainable fashion recycling with Patagonia's Worn Wear program, for example. And that's all well and good, but these retail outlets, you and I, as the individual, we can have the best of intentions for wanting to recycle our clothes, but if policy isn't there to support it, if the infrastructure isn't there to support it at scale, our intentions fall short. They can only go so far. And certainly Patagonia can't recycle, can't mend everyone's backpack, tent, hiking pants, etc. Or Eileen Fisher can, resell everyone's sweater. It's just not feasible. So these are some of the stakeholders who have to be involved. And because the onus is on us as the individual. You want us to change our behavior, which is the hardest thing to change. It has to be easy. There have to be pathways. And that's where retail outlets, whether it is a brick and mortar store like Patagonia, Eileen Fisher, Gap, wherever, or thrift stores, mixed brand stores, for example, they have to be involved in the conversation. And we'll go to the next slide. So what does this model look like in action? If we take the Cotton Australia example and the Merrill Brothers example, I think we can combine them. And we have the clothing and textile industry is very linear. It's a buy, use, discard model. I think instead of putting the onus on the individual and implementing like a curbside textile pickup, for example, instead of putting the onus on the individual, I think we can go to where there are already high volumes of clothes, such as a thrift store. Intercept those clothes before they either get sent to landfill or shipped overseas. They have to be separated between natural fiber and synthetic fiber. The natural fiber clothing can be sent to the municipal composting facility. The synthetic fiber, perhaps there's an opportunity to create more partnerships and send the synthetic fiber to the companies who are pulping it and making bricks and building insulation, etc. The natural fiber can be composted once we have made the compost, because I think it should be municipal back also. I'm going to back up for a second. I think it should be municipal backed instead of privately funded, or have like the Merrill Brothers, it's a private facility with the government support to make it more accessible for people. So once it's composted and we have this beautiful end product, we can use it around town. It can be used in-house with Parks and Rec department, the forestry department, sold to landscapers, sold to farmers, sold to garden stores. It's a revenue stream for this end product. If we use it on farms and gardens and nurseries, it will grow richer crops because it's that multivitamin for the earth. So it's provide and for the plants. So these plants, these trees, etc., are getting a healthy dose of nutrients to grow into a richer plant. And I haven't seen this done anywhere. I haven't found this in my research. This is a model that I have come up with and created based on my research. I do think the secret ingredient is this private public government partnership. And then we can go to the next slide. Looking ahead even further, I've been working as an independent researcher for the past few years. I'm coming at this from a waste reduction and systems thinking perspective. I don't have a background in soil science. I don't have a background in policy. I want to be transparent. I'm interested in working with these people because I see the big picture, and I'm curious to understand the pain points preventing this type of collaboration and figuring out pathways to set up this type of collaboration. Textile composting is a very new field. It is an area worthy of further research and investment. I love compost. I will continue to advocate for compost as a climate solution and as a circular economy tool. If anyone else is interested in those, or if you're a policymaker or a researcher, I would love to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you. And we can open the floor to questions and answers. I have another slide that's just my references, and then the last slide.
Thank you so much, Erica. And I just want to say for everybody real quick too, that we're going to be sending the recording out. I see a few people have to drop. So we're going to be sending the recording out to our ambassador and changemaker community as a whole, and then everybody who signed up for this call with the recording and the slides. So you'll have all of this information that Erica shared.
I see there are some questions in the chat.
I guess we could start from the bottom up. Is it possible to do textile composting in local public gardens, in your experience, Erica?
Yes, absolutely. I in Tampa, in my community where I live, there is the Coalition of Community Gardens, and I have talked to the woman who runs it, and I asked her if she had composted clothing at all, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I use it as a weed mat or landscape fabric all the time." And I think that's one of the lowest hanging fruits. That's one of the easiest ways to compost textiles is you can take an old cotton towel or old cotton sheets and lay it down, cover it with mulch or whatever, and then it'll keep the weeds at bay for a while. Eventually it will decompose. Depends on a number of different factors, your soil type, how much rain you get, etc. But that's one of the easiest ways to compost textiles in local public gardens. I will note that the thread, the chain stitching and the hem is often polyester or nylon. It is not compostable. It will not decompose. So you might sift it out of the ground later, or you can just cut off the hem to begin with and not worry about it and let the item just decompose. And then, yes, if anyone wants to come off mute, I would love to talk to you all.
Yeah, I was wondering, Madison, I don't know if you're able to come off mute, but I know you have a question and you also work at a sorter, which is such a great contact for Erica to meet. But Madison's question is, I'm curious how these case studies you mentioned were able to verify the fiber content and prepare the fabric for composting.
That is a great question. For the Cotton Australia one, from what I gather, Cotton Australia is just a major cotton brand in Australia. And I imagine since they were the ones providing the denim to the project, that they know what's in the denim. I'm not sure what they did about the thread or hem. I haven't seen that listed on their website or in the blogs and updates that they've shared. But I imagine they did address it in some way.
From your personal research, what was the baseline prior to and after? I'm sorry, I'm reading a question from Haley. I'd love to learn what the baseline was prior to and after your composting experiment. Even levels of arsenic and lead can be surprisingly high in areas that seem better environmentally. Many people don't test their soil prior to homesteading. Growing their own produce and even having something like eggs and chickens and are surprised to find out what their soil produce and eggs. That's something that's like an interesting topic too, because like when you have your textiles yeah, I guess it has to be all natural materials, right? Because if you're growing food with that textile, then, you know, the polyester would wind up in your produce.
Yes, the soil that I created, I haven't used it to grow food. We've filled it in around the farm and put it because there's so much food waste in my compost. Did have the compost tested. It had really high levels of magnesium and calcium and zinc. Um, but that's from the food waste. There's no nutritional value in clothing. Um, so we used it at the base of some oak trees, for example. But we haven't used it to grow any food because it needs more testing, and we didn't want to take that chance, take that risk. The baseline soil level, we it the compost area where the area where I've been doing my compost is next to two big oak trees. So um the soil, and in Florida we have a lot of limestone. Um so there weren't a ton of nutrients present in the soil prior, and there was nothing like really happening in the area where I started composting. Um, so I don't really have a baseline, but I didn't see any arsenic in any of the soil tests that we've done.
And how long did it take to decompose?
It depends on the material type. So I've tried to compost everything. I even tried composting polyester, even though I knew it wasn't going to break down. I felt like I had to do the study and have my own data on it. Um, a cotton shirt took about 4.5 months to break down. I composted some wool. Not a lot of people in Florida have wool, so my wool sample is very small. The wool broke down in the least amount of time. It was like 3.5 months. I also composted silk, which took the longest to break down. That was like closer to 9, 10 months, because the weave in silk is so tight versus wool where it's a little bit looser weave. I've cotton denim pants versus the cotton t-shirt or like a cotton canvas tote bag. The denim and the tote bag took like 8 months to break down versus the t-shirt, which was like almost 5 months because of the thickness in the two types of cotton. So it depends on the material type. It also depends on the environment a little bit. In Florida, especially in the summertime, we get a lot of rain, which helps accelerate the decomposition process. The humidity also helps accelerate the decomposition process. So I saw someone is from Canada. With the cold, it would take a little bit longer for those things to decompose in your area. So there are a few different factors that go into play for the length of breakdown.
Alexandra, I see your hand raised.
Thought I might jump in on the screen, even though it's the end of the day here in Italy and I'm, not dressed for it, but hello. And Ericka, thanks for sharing your research and for all your experiments. I have like a million questions, and so I'm going to say, I'll echo what Rose Valentino has written here, that if you want to do some kind of a workshop and get like a Miro board and work through a bunch of stuff, I think a lot of us may have experience that we can contribute. I work in EU projects about sustainability in the textile industry, about circular economy, and in one case also with the recycling factor. So bunch of questions. I was wondering how much food waste you need to balance out. Like, I'm assuming you can't just put a pile of cotton in the garden. That's a question. More of a comment is, I think this would be really interesting, and this sort of throws it into the remake category as an awareness campaign, because it seems to me that what you're doing works very well on a household scale. So if you have a household composter, it's good to know that you can shred up some overused clothing if it's a natural material, remove any buttons, et cetera, and just stick it in your composter. And I think that's a really good way to reduce the pressure that we put on sorting facilities where they're lacking the ability to actually recycle it. On a larger scale, I'm not convinced that it's a great idea. Like this gene thing, why would I spread genes on a field growing cotton, which you said doesn't seem to have much nutrients, when I know that recycling genes is like really easy and you don't have to re-dye it. And so it seems to me to make more sense on a sort of personal or local, very local scale than it does on a larger one, but maybe not.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point you raise. I think I would say that it's an opportunity to hold more moisture in the level sometimes by having the denim or wool. There's another study in the UK that is shredding wool and incorporating it into the topsoil, and it just holds more moisture in the soil. So that can help during times of drought or in water scarcity. As you know, some people say we're entering a water war. So I think that would be one of the benefits for doing it at scale. In terms of accessibility, some people don't have yards, or there's a lot of barriers also to having individuals do it. And frankly, not everyone's going to. So when it comes, personally, I think of it as like you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to clothing circularity because of the sheer volume of clothes that there are. It's an all hands on deck situation. We need people trying, throwing all the spaghetti at the wall to see what is possible, what works, how to do it. And if it's a way to compost or to address our natural fiber clothing waste that is not going to make it another year, another 2 years, or it's just not worth saving because it's like that company picnic shirt from 2 years ago, I think composting it at scale is just a good way to address some of that waste. And I'm sorry, your first question again was
Related, and a bunch of us have asked this, how much green matter versus brown matter, I think is how Holly put it, and that's more technical than I know, so there you go.
yes. Yes, you wouldn't want to do, in general, a compost is like 50% green matter, 50% brown matter. When I composted clothing, I probably did like a quarter clothing to 3/4 of food waste because a t-shirt is obviously much bigger than banana peels and coffee grinds. So to try to keep the balance that way, I did like a quarter of textiles with 3/4 of food waste. And then I still added oak leaves and newspaper and other brown matter material to equal like a 50-50 ratio.
And what about, I see in the chat, fabrics like rayon, which aren't natural, like it's not clear in the camp of natural or synthetic.
Hold on, wait, I'm looking for the question. Oh, what's the word on fabric? I have gotten this question before too, because rayon is, in theory, a natural fiber. It's plant or tree pulp. But sometimes the process it goes through to become a fiber and a material makes it more synthetic than natural like. I have composted rayon. Sometimes it's decomposed, sometimes it hasn't. I don't have a clear answer for that because, as you suggest, it doesn't fall into a clear camp of natural or synthetic. Maybe that would go back to the manufacturers and better labeling their tag. Although I'm not a manufacturer or a designer, I don't know what that process is like. What all the items that haven't decomposed in my compost, like the thread and buttons, zippers, I just sift out later. I recognize that would be harder to do at scale. I don't think it's impossible. I think we just need the right giant sifter to do it in a municipal fac facility. Um, but this is why I say it's an area that needs more testing, more prototyping, more piloting in, one community to figure out what the blueprint looks like that can then be adopted in other communities.
Is Allison, I have a question, the Rust Belt fiber shed, is that like with the municipality
The
there?
Rust Belt fiber shed.
Yeah, so they are an extension of the mother or the general fiber shed.
Right.
But each one is owned by a different organization. They have to get their 501(c)(3)s individually. So the Rust Belt Fiber Shed is the one that I am in Cincinnati. They're based out of Cleveland, Ohio, but they just got their 501(c) and have been doing a lot of different work with soil-to-soil textiles. They have a lot of presentations on it as well, and have been working more with like natural fibers like wool, especially since we have so many alpacas in Ohio and in the Midwest. That it's really interesting. They have a lot of great resources specifically around wool.
That sounds awesome. I don't think we have a Florida or Southeast fiber shed community.
There's a lot of great ideas and conversation in the chat, and I encourage everyone to keep in touch with Ericka, and if there's conversation or like ideas that you come across in your networks where we could support this research and work on it together, I'd love to keep in touch and keep this conversation going. If anybody has any other questions for Ericka, feel free to come off mute or drop them in the chat. It's really amazing. I love seeing your personal research, Ericka.
Thanks. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
I have my bow tie business. I was just getting too many fabric scraps and I didn't want to throw them away and I didn't know what to do with them. And, it's like cotton and linen. And it's like, oh, well, if it came from the earth, it can go back to the earth. So I just threw in some fabric scraps in my home compost tumbler and then they decomposed. And then I started with some bigger items and like a whole t-shirt and it just kept growing.
And look how many hundreds of pounds you've saved from landfill. It's really remarkable.
Thank you. Yes. I'm just an individual and I have had a lot of people have donated clothes to me that I've composted and it yeah, it is nice to look back and be like, okay, this is what I've done. Like this is what we could do as a community or just further.
Yeah, like thank you for showing us what's possible. It's so fascinating to me, and you've opened my eyes to what is possible that I didn't know before, especially those pellets. Like that is seems to me to be the answer, like more of that.
Yes, the pellets were very cool. It was a really cool facility tour. Um, yes, thank you everyone. I appreciate you all so much for being here, taking the time out of your afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are in the world. And please keep in touch. Feel free to email. I would love to have conversations with all of you.
Yes, and we'll be sending a recap. We'll send a recording of this call and a full recap and any other questions that you have. feel free to reach out to me or Allison and Erica, of course, who dropped her email in the chat, and we'll share that again. But thank you all. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy Earth Month, gang.
Yes, happy Earth Month.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.